Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our the Talent Apps Finance webinar. I am very excited about the panel that we have today. We have AJ Roos, who's Vice President of William Blair. We have Louise Chapman and Lester George, both at Praetura. We have Daniel Slater, Simon Johnson, and John Moran from Zeus Capital. And we have Olivia Rylance from the Hut Group. So the first thing I want to do is go around everyone in turn and so that they can introduce themselves and give just a little bit of background as to what they do. And as I have a list here, I'll go from the top. So AJ, please do introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about what you do.
Sure, thanks, Naomi. Hi all, lovely to meet you. So as Naomi said, I'm a VP based in London at William Blair, who is a global investment bank. And my kind of trajectory from university. So I studied at Newcastle. I did a degree that was sponsored by PwC. It was a 4-year program. I then graduated in 2011 and joined PwC at that point onto the grad scheme. Spent 4 years there in London and 3 in Hong Kong before coming back to the UK. And then I joined Blair 3 years ago. That's a little bit about me.
Great, thanks, AJ. And Louise Chapman, hello. Tell us a bit more about what you do.
Hi, I'm Louise Chapman. I work at Praetura Ventures. So we are a venture capitalist based in Manchester. So we invest in startup or small businesses, hoping that they will, with our investment, that they will grow, become much bigger businesses that everybody's heard of. So I studied maths at university in Manchester. I then joined KPMG on their graduate program in restructuring, which is a bit strange for my area I work in now. So we deal with kind of like businesses in distress and insolvency. So I worked there for 9 years and then I just fancied a complete change. And so that's when I joined Praetura in 2017.
Great, thank you. And Lester, what about you?
Hi everyone, I'm Lester George. I'm a finance business partner with a management accounting qualification and I work for Praetura. But Praetura's got two elements to it. It's got the venture capital side and it's also got a lending division as well. I work primarily in the lending division. So my role is effectively, in a nutshell, is to support the various different departments and to make good decisions. And I do that by providing financial analysis and information. And a good decision will tend to be one that leads to profitability. So I got into this through. When I left university, I started in a call centre and then moved on to a graduate programme with the Cooperative Group. And I spent a good number of years there before moving to a debt purchaser, working about 5 years there. And then I moved across to Praetura in 2019.
Great, lovely to meet you. And so Daniel Slater, tell us a bit more about your role and what you do, your background.
Hi there. I am an equity research analyst and I work at Zeus Capital alongside Simon, one of the other panelists. Essentially what an equity research analyst does, we write reports on companies that are listed on the stock exchange, essentially trying to come to a view as to whether we think investors should buy or sell their shares. That involves bits of work thinking about the company, trying to look at where it is versus competitors, what it does, what it's going to be doing going forward. But also a very important part of it is financial forecasting and valuation. So we build Excel models to try and work out how much money we think it's going to make, revenue, profit, etc., over the next few years, and then what we think that is worth in terms of a share price and the value for the company. And then part of the way we think about it is, okay, fine, if we think it's worth that, higher or lower than where it is at the moment, what's going to happen? What's the company going to report? What other interesting things are going to happen in the wider market with competitors that's actually going to make it go to the value that we think it's worth? And so we do that work, we talk to the company, we work out the numbers, we write the report, and then we go out and we tell investors about it. So we send them a copy of the report, we ring them up, we talk to them, hopefully they'll be interested in what we have to say. And that's essentially what it is. So it's writing, it's adding up, and it's talking to people. That's essentially what I do.
Great, thank you. And Simon, can you elaborate? Is it slightly different in your sector of Zeus?
So yeah, my name is Simon Johnson. I am a director in corporate broking at Zeus. So what that means, if you think about the different areas of the business, we've essentially got the the side that deals with the market, and that's our traders, our equity sales guys, and Dan. And Dan is giving the sales guys and the traders information as to what they should be telling their clients to buy and sell. And if you think about the other side of the investment bank, that's the corporate clients. So I manage the relationship between our corporate clients and the market. So any of our corporate clients will pay us an annual retainer for looking after them, and that's everything from giving them advice on all the rules and regulations of being on the market, but then also what their investors are thinking about them, getting them prepared, hopefully, for some kind of a transaction. And for us, that's where we really make our fee. That's advising on transactions and raising capital for companies.
Great, thank you. And John Moran, welcome also. Can you explain what you're doing as well within Zeus?
I know me. Yeah, my name's John. I work in the investment banking team here at Zeus. I work here with Simon and Daniel. As Simon alluded on before, in terms of transactions, so I work on both the public and private side, getting transactions over the line, advising clients. I have joined from university, so I'm an analyst. So I've joined Zeus in 2021. I went to University of Liverpool and studied business economics, and I've been at Zeus for 2 years now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Lovely to meet you. And finally, Olivia, it's great to meet you too. And please tell us all a bit about what you do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia. I am the Group Financial Controller at the Hook Group. For those of you that haven't heard of the Hook Group, you might have heard of some of our brands, which are Look Fantastic, Cult Beauty, My Protein. So I actually work in the Ingenuity division, which is the tech division that underpins all of those websites. Super exciting, been here just over a year. Prior to that, so I trained at Deloitte in Manchester in the audit department, and then I've worked at AO.com and UK Fast most recently.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to go back to John first, because John, you are the youngest person on our panel here, and you've said you've joined as an analyst in Zeus. So for Zeus and for investment banks, is the analyst role the first role people would naturally go into? Obviously, there are lots of different grad roles. Can you explain how you went about getting that role and what your trajectory might look like?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so the analyst is the first role you kind of enter when you join investment banking. And in each kind of role, you've got analyst, then to associate director, then director. Within the roles, there's different tier systems, obviously, when you progress all the way through. So I joined through, first of all, it was initially getting the interview. So there's a few stages that I needed to go through. So first of all, it was a phone interview. So I kind of had a phone interview with an AD, kind of got through the process in that respect. And then the next stage was to have a face-to-face interview with both ADs and directors. Again, went through that process, and I can allude on some questions if need be, but we went through that kind of atmosphere. And then the final one is I sit down with the head of investment banking. So we sat down again, and that was kind of like the 3-stage process to get into Zeus. So obviously I've joined since then. Been here for just under 2 years now. So working across, obviously, like I said, public and private, in both the consumer and industrials team. So when you come into Zeus now, there's different sector focus teams in terms of where you might be aligned. I don't know if that covers everything. I know anything else you need?
That is really interesting. And how did you find out about Zeus? Did you find out about Zeus at university, or did you do your own research?
No, so yeah, it was from university. So I did my own research. I'm based in the Manchester office, and Simon and Dan are obviously based in London. So I obviously was researching what companies would be in Manchester and what I could start applying to. Leaving university, obviously, you apply for many grad schemes, as probably the panelists know more than myself, that basically I was going through the process and going through the works. Zeus was one that caught my eye. I got in touch with a recruiter who's obviously director of Zeus. You can apply via the email with Zeus. And that's kind of the stage that I went through HR from that perspective.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, so Praetura and William Blair, I know, AJ, that your role in William Blair, you work quite closely to venture capitalist companies, I believe, in terms of investment. Is that correct? Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So we typically kind of act as an intermediary between buyers and sellers, and often they are either venture capital funds or private equity funds. And so there's a kind of bit of background on how those funds work. They're effectively pools of money that then look to go and invest in businesses, whether that's public markets like the Zeus guys do, or private markets, which is more of a focus for William Blair. And those funds will hold businesses typically for 3 or 5 years, and then we'll look to go and sell them. And that's where we act in that process. So we will help prepare the company for sale, run the sale process, negotiate with buyers. And so that's kind of our role within venture capital and private equity.
And in William Blair, there are two different definitive sections of William Blair, aren't there? So can you explain that? Because obviously you're in one section and there is another section as well.
Yeah, so we have the investment banking division, which is the bit I sit in, which is that kind of advisory piece where we look to advise companies, private equity funds, entrepreneurs on buying and selling businesses. And then we also have the investment management division, which is kind of more traditional asset management, where that business is managing wealth for individuals, hedge funds, other financial institutions, and it's 3 to 4 billion of patient capital that we are investing on behalf of people that need support on that.
Thank you. And Louise and Lester, can you tell me a bit more about the companies that you invest in and how that works?
Yeah, sure. So our investors we have kind of two different types of investors. So they can be institutional investors, which are, at the moment, we've got like a life sciences fund, which is funded by the councils and the local authorities in the Northwest. But also we have private investors as well, who invest their money with us, hoping to make a return on their money. So the kind of companies that we invest in are generally quite small, early stage businesses with maybe a tech focus, a life sciences focus. So this can be anything from, they might have like 5 employees up to 50 employees, usually when we meet them. And we usually invest between about £1 and £3 million initially. And then we might give them some more money later on if they're growing and doing well. And then that's where we might like link in with like a William Blair or some other kind of corporate finance advisor when the company's hopefully doing really, really well. And we're looking then to sell our share in that company to then make money for our investors.
That's great. And Lester, you talked about basically be lending, and how does that work in terms of, because obviously you're a different side of Praetura. How do you work in conjunction?
So unlike the venture side, which is taking an equity stake in a company, what we're looking to do is to lend to small and medium-sized enterprises right the way across the UK. We've got a number of different divisions within the lending side, which do that. We do that with a range of different products, but typically we can lend anything between, say, 25,000 up to maybe £3 million. And ultimately that what we're trying to do is we're raising funds from both private investors and also large institutional like banks and things like that, and we're basically lending out at a higher rate than we're borrowing at, and that margin between the two, and that needs to cover all of our costs, needs to cover the risk of credit defaults, and hopefully it needs to make a bit of profit as well, and that effectively is what the lending division does.
Great, brilliant, thank you. So looking, I just want to link about people's backgrounds and what they studied at school and what they did at university to come now into a much more kind of finance role. I obviously avoid Olivia. I'll speak at you first because I know what your degree was, but I believe your degree was very different to that of what you do now. Obviously, there are lots of similarities, but if you can explain that, because I think a lot of people think that they have to do a certain degree to get into financial services, but I just don't think that any of us really believe that to be the case. What
No, definitely not. Definitely not. So I did a Spanish degree, and I know that one of my old colleagues did a history degree. So I really don't think it matters what degree you do. I mean, I'm thinking about A levels as well. I did psychology, I did Spanish, I did English. Yeah. I really didn't think I even wanted to be an accountant until I'd finished university and was looking at my options. So I definitely don't think it matters what degree you've done to get into financial services.
And do you think that, and so when you're going into a more grad role, and obviously you went through Deloitte initially, do you think, what are the kind of things you think they're looking at then, if you don't have that obvious kind of finance in your
I think
CV?
it's probably just looking for the skills required to be successful in finance. So, maybe are you quite analytical? Are you good with numbers? Do you have the sort of right personality? Can you, I'm thinking about audit, for example. Do you have the personality where you could go and talk to a client? Things like that. So it's not necessarily about your financial literacy. There's lots of other things that come into play.
Great, thank you. And Simon, what do you look for in somebody that you might be employing at a more junior level?
I've taken on grads and undergrads for internships, and we haven't done anything at Zeus, and I'm quite new to Zeus. My company was acquired by Zeus a year ago, but we take them from a variety of backgrounds. So there needs to be an interest and a bit of a knowledge in the stock market and business in general. That doesn't necessarily mean that their degree has to be in that, but when I'm interviewing them, there has to be a bit of excitement. I think that the careers that we can offer are varied and can be quite very exciting. But it's the sort of thing that the people that really sort of strike a chord with us are the ones that are probably in their investment club at college, or have got a little portfolio, or have been reading the financial pages of a newspaper, and that they've been interested in the economy and the stock market for a variety of times. I mean, I did a business degree. The guy I sit next to read history. So that doesn't matter, but it's that sort of interest in companies. The next thing I'm looking for, particularly when it comes to an internship, whether it be a summer or full year, is you can see it as an extended interview process. It's just attitude, and it's a great attitude, and that comes from, that's being given a task of, I don't know, a load of PowerPoint presentations to polish up and make look good, and come up smiling and say, can you give me some more, please? That sort of thing, you can only really tell when you spend some time with people, because some people are just very good at interviews, which is why I would suggest to all undergrads or at that level, if you're interested in a career in finance, there are a lot of internship or summer placement opportunities out there, and you should be trying to take advantage of those. They are very competitive to get on. And as opposed to prove that you've got that bit of attitude, it's the wider things in your CV that you can talk about at an interview. Not everybody is playing, I don't know, cricket for the first 11 or hockey, but other outside activities that you've done that have put a bit of effort in. So Duke of Edinburgh, music societies, sports clubs, things like that. Just show a more rounded person that's going to get on with a team.
Yeah, that's really important. We find that obviously some of the students that we work with don't have so much time on their hands in terms of maybe supporting their families, or have to take a lot of jobs around their work. So it's very important that people need to draw on those experiences as well, and not feel that it has to be that kind of like Uber activity they've done, but just make sure you draw on any experience you do to show your teamwork and how you've worked well to get ahead. Obviously, in this call now, in this webinar now, we've got a group of people that are half based in Manchester and half in London. And does anyone talk on the fact that I think the Manchester and London are quite financial hubs, and so now there are opportunities in both these cities for people, and so it's not just London. There is a lot happening in Manchester, but are there any other up and coming cities in the UK that you feel do have great financial hubs? Because often people don't think that all roads lead to London, and they're looking for jobs akin to yours which are nearer to home. Can anyone else talk on this?
I started my career in Birmingham for the first 10 years of my life. I suppose it's not necessarily, and I was a proud, it might not sound like it, but I was a proud Brummie. I think sadly I spent most of my time heading down to London. It does depend on the career. Now clearly when it comes to accountancy, banking, certainly venture capital and private equity firms have all got big regional offices. I'm afraid in the stock market it has become much more London centric, and our Manchester office is a bit half and half, with some guys doing a lot of private work and M&A as well as the public markets. And of course, because we're out in the region, we've got sort of the northwest sewn up when it comes to looking after the sort of public companies outside London. But sadly for me, I ended up just being drawn to London because I'm afraid that's where most of the capital is. That's not to say that there is not a lot of great opportunities for students looking for a career in finance in the regional cities.
Great. Does anyone else have any more thoughts? I know the Bank of England has just recently moved to Leeds. Does anyone else have any thoughts of other areas that of different areas of financial services could be in different regions of the UK?
I think there's opportunities everywhere. I think, like Simon said, if you're very specific and want to go into something like the stock market and stockbroking, then potentially you may have to go to London. But if it's just general finance or you're looking for a career in accountancy, obviously I can only really talk to accountancy, you can literally go anywhere. If I think about the big four accountancy firms, they have offices in the majority of the cities in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking outside the box, now that I work in industry, most companies now offer graduate schemes within finance. So you can do your accountancy qualification within a company like THG. And there are companies like THG dotted all over the UK. So if you want to work in finance, I wouldn't say you have to go to London.
And does everybody in this call, I don't know this, have accountancy qualifications, or can you work in the level that you do without an accountancy qualification? Does anybody not have an accountancy qualification? I think, John, you might be trying.
I don't have an accountancy qualification, but I did work for an accountant. But I worked in mergers and acquisitions at EY. And I don't think Dan, but we have other qualifications. So there are other routes.
Can you explain those other qualifications? That'd be really helpful.
So I'm not too sure. John, you might be able to a little bit more, but for us, there's the Chartered Financial Analyst. In my day, there were stock exchange exams, but that's because I'm very, very old. But John, you might explain the route that you're taking.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, you don't have to do an accountancy degree. A qualification is such that obviously work in investment banking. So if you look at like the team in Manchester and also in London, the team's mix in terms of people coming from the likes of Big Four and kind of the typical ACA route into IB. But for example, like from my perspective, I came in younger at like an analyst level, and I'm learning as I go. So the qualification that I completed, it wasn't ACA or accountancy based. It had accountancy mixed in there, but obviously it was the whole breadth of transaction based, more financial knowledge, like wellness, and you kind of culture behind everything. So it was kind of a mixed bunch of everything. So that was the CISI corporate finance qualifications. And obviously, like Simon touched on, you could go on to do either an ACA, or you could go on to do a CFA. I think really you can kind of pave your own way when you come into like finance, especially unless you're doing a pure accountancy kind of role, like maybe Olivia is. I think then you obviously would need to be a qualified accountant as such. But when you come to IB, you can kind of potentially cast your own net. So it doesn't have to be just coming in from typical ACA route. And like you said about people doing degrees, even in Manchester as such. So I did come from kind of like the business economics background and kind of going down the typical finance route. But based on other people in Manchester as well, they've come from history degrees, English degrees. I think like Olivia touched on, you can kind of build the soft skills at university. And then if you just bring them into your actual role itself and show eagerness, I think you'd be able to do it anyway.
Great, thank you.
Can I understand actually? So although I came from quite a traditional route, kind of KPMG, blah, 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 we at Praetura, and I know this is the same for a lot of employers now, are hiring people straight from university, like for example, John was saying, but also people who haven't been to university as well. Yeah. So maybe they've done other jobs first, so they can kind of show their interest. It could still be a little bit in the financial services sector, but different types of jobs. But also at Praetura, we have started hiring apprentices as well. So this is people who are 18, who maybe just don't fancy going to university. There's not the right circumstances for them at the moment. So there are lots of other different routes into financial services as well. You definitely don't have to go university accountant, but you don't also have to go to university either, if that's not for you.
That's a really good point. Sorry, yes.
It's worth also pointing out as well, Louise, if you start off in your first role, your entry role, then you probably want to use that role as a proving ground and somewhere where you get noticed and get promoted into a role that ultimately will pay for an accountancy qualification for you and hopefully give you study leave alongside it as well. So that you can look to apply for a role that's maybe an entry-level finance role, or that will then develop into an accountancy qualification, and that will open doors for you as well.
That's brilliant. And it's really important to say that, degree apprenticeships and level 4 apprenticeships and the level 3, level 4 apprenticeships are such good ways to get in to roles to get into a company such as yours, and ways as well to stay local if people would like to do that, because there are so many in local areas. AJ, do you know about any apprenticeship roles that William Blair do at the present time?
We don't run any apprenticeships, but we run a pretty structured internship program. So typically after you finish university, we run a 6-month program. I think probably what's a little bit different to some of the traditional internships is it's 6 months long. It's not just over a couple of weeks or a summer, and you get paid as if you're a full analyst. And so it's kind of a little bit of an extended job interview where you'd work for us for 6 months. You're fully integrated into the team. You do live deal work as if you were a first-year analyst, and then obviously, off the back of your feedback from that 6 months, would be whether you get a full-time offer. But I think that's a great scheme in terms of being able to, for both Blair and any prospective candidates, for being able to kind of see if this is right, over a prolonged period of time, and hopefully it is.
Great, thank you. And Dan, I haven't really had much of a chance to speak to you as yet. I'd love to know a bit more about exactly your day to day, and also it'd be great if you could tell me a career high that you've had to date.
No, absolutely. As I say, a lot of our day to day is sort of writing those reports, adding up the numbers, and talking to people. But really, what it's all about is helping Simon's department with helping companies raise money. That's really what the whole firms and our capital markets activities really are about. And so that's what you spend a lot of your time thinking about as well, trying to go and see new corporate clients that you don't already do work for, trying to see if there's something you can do for them, trying to look after the ones you already have at the moment that are sort of signed up as a retained client with you, looking after them, making sure you know what's happening with them and their company, making sure investors know what's happening with them, so that you sort of look after the share price and try and help promote that in the interim between when you might be raising them some money. And so all the things that we do in terms of the modeling, the writing stuff, it all really sort of goes to that. In terms of a career high, really, actually, it all comes back to that, and it's about which companies we've been able to potentially win as corporate clients and then raise money for. So there was a company a few years ago called Amerisa, which was very popular, had production. We do a lot of oil and gas, oil production in Colombia. And that was a very useful, high-profile client for us. It was a great win for us as a company. It was good to be able to talk to all the investors that were already invested in it and introduce yourselves to them if you didn't speak to them already. It was good to be able to introduce new investors to what was a very credible story. The company ended up getting bought out and taken over by one of its larger competitors. So as a successful conclusion as well, you could point to that and say, not only was it an interesting company that people liked, but we ended up making money for people on the back of it as well. And so that was very helpful for our sort of energy, oil and gas sector franchise. And that was very good to do.
Great. And I think what I've learned from what you've been saying as well is that, your roles and many people's roles is there's account management, there's being a people person, there's having clients, there's and so it's, some people think, oh, banking is all about the numbers, but it isn't. I would say for everybody, and so if someone can speak to this, a lot of it is about communication skills and about your clients and so how you communicate and how you put yourselves out there. Can anyone else talk on that?
Yeah, I mean, a large part of my role is effectively that, as a business partner, I've got to go out and make, good relationships with everybody in the business and understand how their departments work. So my role isn't it doesn't work on a month-end cycle like a lot of entry-level finance roles might work that way. I kind of do project work, and I work directly for the CFO. So as and when projects arise, it can be with any area of the business, I need to go out and quickly understand the issue and solve the problem. And that's not just sitting down necessarily, just looking at the numbers. That can be, all sorts of things, process mapping. It can be, conversations with different people. So yeah, it's definitely not just pure numbers.
Great, thank you. Now we have a question, and please, anyone that's watching, please put some questions in the Q&A now, and I'll start relaying those. Oh, I've got two now. The first question is, are there any opportunities for students aged 16 to 18 to get involved with any of your companies, whether that be in London or any other location?
We have an apprenticeship program that, we have apprentices that come and work for us. Some of those apprentices are, I think some are under 18. But I mean, again, that'd be something you could pick up and speak to our HR department about.
And I think just as an organisation, we're very keen to help support with work experience, which everybody on this call knows. The Talent Hub itself does it over 18, tends to, because we take people away often and to maybe to work in businesses that aren't in their local environments. But I know there are opportunities, I'm sure, for people to get involved at a younger level in outreach to schools as well. Daksha says, what parts of the field are very quantitative? Have you read any books that would be good to understand the maths computations behind those roles?
Within stockbroking, there's highly quantitative and highly qualitative roles, and there are some that are a mixture of the two. So very quantitative, I suppose, are the guys that work with our traders. I mean, it's purely quantitative, and in bigger investment banks, there'll be quite complicated work that goes on around derivatives that trade off the back of what some investment banks would call cash equities trading. So that is quite clearly like that. In Dan's role, and also in John's role, it becomes quite a bit of a mix. So companies are not just based on a spreadsheet. So it starts with that. So there is obviously a clearly quantitative role in understanding the numbers behind a business, but businesses and what really makes them tick are the people, and that's where the qualitative side comes in.
Absolutely not. It's far too much effort, isn't it? No, there's that one by Michael Lewis, Fast Boys, I think it's called, which is about Michael Lewis writes some good books. They're very entertaining, and they're far more easy to digest than something academic like that.
Great, that's good to know. That's really good to know. Do you have a career high to date, or something that can explain more how what you've done within your role specifically has added to the bigger picture?
I would say, I think that in a lot of what I think all of us do, it's a very fulfilling role within finance, particularly if you're working on transactions, and so at the completion of any transaction, there's a real sense of achievement, particularly when you're helping, whether it's a management team, an owner, an entrepreneur, fulfill the objectives that they had, whether that's getting a new owner, raising capital to grow, buying another business. That's all pretty exciting, and being able to support people on that journey is a real privilege. I think probably at a more personal level, having moved to Blair 3 years ago, to have then been able to introduce the Talent Tap to that, and so we're in our second year now of hosting 4 students. That's probably one of my personal highlights, is being able to have kind of introduced the Talent Tap to Blair and have seen it flourish, which has been great.
Great, that's fantastic. Thank you. So I'm going to ask, go back to Olivia now, and Olivia, can you just explain to us a bit more about the Hut Group, because it's quite different, because obviously you run a lot of brands, and it's a little bit more about what you were saying within your role within the brands that you work in, because it is quite separate.
Yeah, so the Hut Group has been through a sort of restructuring in the last year or so to sort of divisionalize everything. So we have nutrition, beauty, ingenuity. Ingenuity is where I work, and like I said before, that is the tech side of things, and we basically run everybody's websites, run all our clients' websites. All of their stock is in our warehouse. We ship it, we collect the cash. We basically run the business on behalf of people. Super exciting, lots of growth going on at the moment. And what my role is as a group financial controller within a division. So we're sort of a group within a group. It's up to me to sort of look at all the different businesses within Ingenuity, pull all of their numbers together each month, and be able to explain to the board each month what's happened in the month, why has it happened, and what we're doing about it. So if we've done well, great, this is what we're going to continue doing. If we've not done so well, what are we going to do about it? And what, for example, do we need to cut costs? What costs are we going to cut? Those types of things. What else do we look after? So we're also, it's kind of just a very typical finance role. It's looking after your accruals, prepayments, making sure that your month-end numbers are correct, and ultimately just ensuring control of the finances within the business.
Great. So yes, so that's very much more keeping your business ticking over and running, and make sure you're doing that. as effectively as possible, obviously, to ultimately make the goal of making a profit. So it's great how you're doing that in-house to support a business, where the other people within the webinar now are talking about almost support working with other businesses or investors to then make money for them. So it's really interesting, the different types of roles that can be found within one large, umbrella of an industry, I suppose. There's a question for AJ. Working in M&A, so that's mergers and acquisitions for anyone. Do you have much interaction with public markets, or is it all private?
So good question. It depends on where you sit within William Blair. So if I look at my US colleagues, so we're headquartered in Chicago, that's where kind of 80% of our business sits. My kind of M&A colleagues in the US would have interactions with both public and private markets. And so, we will list businesses on the NASDAQ and on the New York Stock Exchange. In Europe, we're headquartered out of London, but we have offices in Germany, Holland, and kind of throughout Western Europe. We just focus on private markets. Is being able to kind of cover 6 or 7 countries and 6 or 7 stock exchanges is pretty tough and pretty expensive to be able to do in Europe. So in Europe, we just do private markets.
Great, thanks. That's great. So I just would like to go to every person individually, and for them to say to the people who are listening, be they of school age or be they looking to get a role now, why you decided to go into a role like this, what you think is the ultimate thing that you need to be able to thrive in this role, and one piece of advice. So why you went in, the ultimate thing you need to thrive, and one piece of advice for either a school leaver or a graduate to get ahead. So I will start, as I've just spoken to you, AJ, I'll start first with Louise.
Okay, so why I went into it. Now, I have to admit, when I was at university, I'd never heard of KPMG or anything. This wasn't an early interest for me. I didn't grow up wanting to be an accountant. It was just at a careers fair. Like I said, I did maths. They were there. I just kind of fell upon them and thought, oh yeah, being an accountant, that sounds okay. I'll apply. And then I then started to really take an interest in it, and that's how it happened. In terms of advice I would give to people, there's so many different routes that you can go down, and like we've all discussed here, don't feel that when you're 16 or 18 or 21 you have to follow a specific path that maybe you're not keen on just because you think that's what you should do. If you're thinking of studying university, study what you want to study at university. Don't study economics just because you think that's what you should do, or accounting, finance. Study what interests you, and if you do well at that degree, you'll still be able to get a job at the employers. And also it'll then show in your interview that you're talking about things that you enjoy doing, and that really comes out in an interview rather than it being a bit forced and this is what I think I should say and this is what I think I should do. You have to have a bit of a genuine interest and a genuine passion for it.
That's really, really good advice. Thank you. I've got a question for you that's just come in, and then we'll move on with what I asked before. In VC, venture capitalism and private equity, do you just advise the companies that you work with, or you do take an active role within the company?
So what we do is we meet companies, first of all, who we're not involved in, but who are looking for investment. So they need investment in their business to grow. So we'll initially meet them, and then if we work well together, they meet our criteria, they like us, and we invest, we then do work with the business. So generally we'll sit on the board of their business as well. We won't take an active role within the business, we wouldn't be an employee type role, but we'd be going to board meetings, strategy meetings, and working with the management of the business to help their business be the best that it can be. And ultimately, in 3, 5, 7, 10 years' time, sell the business and sell our stake in it.
Great, thank you. And Lester, just going back to the questions I asked, could you answer them?
Surely. I started my career when I left university. I joined a call centre. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Again, I did history at university, history with economics, but I'd really kind of leaned towards the history side of it. And it was while I was at the call centre, I kind of found out about the graduate programme, and I applied to the graduate programme. When I originally applied for it, I got all the way through to the assessment centre stage. I'd done loads and loads of work and prep for it, and I didn't get it that first year. And the reason I didn't get it is because I didn't have enough leadership experience. So I went back to the call centre and just worked as hard as I could, got promoted to team manager, and then did that for a year, and then went back and applied the year after. So again, so I suppose that the point that I'm making with that is that, you know, again, you don't, just because it doesn't happen, say, first time around, you can keep going at that. And actually, again, when I left university, I didn't want to necessarily become an accountant. I joined just a call centre as a different role, whilst I kind of wanted to work out what I wanted to do. So that's ultimately how I got into finance. The reason I picked finance, there was two graduate programs I could choose from. There's a finance graduate program, there's a project management graduate program. And I chose the finance one because it came with a qualification and it came with study leave as well. And I kind of felt at the time that if somebody was prepared to invest in me, and you know that was, you know, given a choice out of the two, that was definitely something I'd rather do. I mean, studying is difficult. Studying while working is really challenging, and you shouldn't, you know, choose that lightly. But you know, it was a really good decision. I'm really happy with where I've ended up, and really enjoying my career today.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And Dan, again, if you could explain that, answer the questions that I asked.
For me, I suppose it's as much interesting why I ended up doing finance as it is why I ended up doing energy and oil and gas. And for me, because often one ends up specializing in a sector, particularly doing equity research or M&A or what have you. And I ended up doing oil and gas just because I had a bit of exposure to it. I had a short rotation through the oil and gas team at the place I was working. And it, as an industry sector, I've always found it really interesting, really fantastic. You get lots of different exotic locations where all these oil fields are located, because they're not located where you want them, they're located where the oil is. So you get to look at all these interesting jurisdictions. There's big bits of kit that people use, ships, rigs, platforms, all that kind of stuff, which is quite fun. It's a bit childish, but it's a lot of fun. And also this smaller end of the oil business, exploration and production, we call it, has got an awful lot of entrepreneurial, risk-taking, mostly slightly mad people that you get to interact with and talk to. And that's really rather fun as well. So you get to sit in London playing around with your spreadsheet and being involved in the finance piece, but you get exposure to this fascinating, international, exciting, perilous industry that can make and lose people fortunes on the turn of a drill bit. And it's marvelous. And I've always really rather enjoyed it. And so that's why I ended up in this particular niche that I'm in terms of what people need. And people need to succeed in finance. I think a lot of the time it's flexibility and the willingness to kind of do stuff, work out what the market's doing, what the market wants at any given time, not be too wedded to any particular idea or any particular thing you want to do. You're never always going to work with exactly the clients you want to, or exactly the firm you want to, or in exactly the market you want to work in. But the idea that one way or the other, you work out what's going on at any particular time and adapt to that in terms of the clients you speak to, how you speak to them, what you're trying to do with them. That, I think, is probably the most important thing for finance. None of the maths is very complicated at all. It's just a question. Anything you have to do is just a question of hard work. But it's that willingness and ability to be flexible, I think, is probably the most important thing, and the common thread that seems to run through the majority of people who work in the city and work in finance. Specifically, if you want to work in a stock market facing role, one of the things you could do that I think would mark you out is if you actually picked 6 companies that you thought were interesting, start reading their stock market announcements, which you can get off the LSE or off of Investigate. And when those come out, looking what the shares do that day and in the subsequent week or two on the back of it, and try and work out why that happened. What did they report? What did they say? And what did the stock market do on the back of it? Because that really, no one who acts in the stock market really cares about the companies or what they actually do. What we really care about is how much dividend is it paying out, and are the shares going to go up or down? That's really what we're bothered about. So working out how what the company does and says translates into what the stock price does, that is the real sort of thing to kind of understand. And so were you to be able to sit in an interview for a grad job or an apprentice job or something like that and say, gosh, well, I was looking at Tesco and I saw they had their interim results out and they were a little bit behind consensus actually, but funnily enough, the shares were up sort of 4% over the coming couple of weeks. And I think that's because X, Y, and Z, they're opening a bunch more stores or whatever it may or may not be, but working out what drives share prices and why. And you can do that just by looking at company announcements and then looking at what the shares have done. And then you get to understand how investors are interpreting that.
That's really helpful. Thank you. That's really interesting. Thanks. And Simon, moving on from that, what would be your answers to the questions?
I think a lot of it's been covered, and I particularly agreed with Louise. If you can go into a role that you are fascinated in and enjoy, you'll thrive. The bit that I would sort of, going back to sort of the advice is, personally, I've had quite a varied career. I mean, I've always been a stockbroker, but that has included being running money. I've been in corporate finance for quite a number of years, despite my lack of attention to detail and a lot of chatting rather than actual dealing with numbers. And then I ended up finding that raising capital for companies and selling deals was probably something that I had a bit of a knack of. So that's where I've ended up being a corporate broker rather than a corporate financier. So going back to a number of people on the call, that first job, particularly in something like a KPMG or a PwC, if you're straight out of university, great companies will give you a big variety of skill sets, obviously a qualification, but you'll get people skills, you'll get team working skills, you'll get exposure to a variety of industries. Wouldn't be a bad start if you're not entirely sure where to go. So two bits would be, don't be afraid of a variety, looking ahead, not knowing exactly what it's going to be, because where you start at 21 can be completely different to when you're 50, and just do something that you enjoy or you're passionate about, and you'll thrive.
That's great. Thanks very much. And John, you're more at the coalface end of this right now. So do you have any advice that you've got from more recently?
Yeah, apologies. I probably, like everyone said, I don't want to repeat everything what everyone's already gave advice-wise. From my perspective, I'd just say to anyone leaving, say, high school, college, university, like you said, it's just slow down, relax, and kind of not be afraid of what's next. Because I know from my perspective, like even leaving university, I left in the COVID era as well. So it was even worse of what's going to happen now? Where am I going? You get that kind of post-university fear. And I think you have that in every kind of next step you take. So for me personally, I think just putting yourself in the best position in terms of focusing on what you're doing right now, whether that is a part-time job, whether that's in your university, whether that's just education in general. I think once you've kind of added a few strings to your bow, and then you can kind of speak to a few people, I think everyone's got access to like LinkedIn and whatnot now. So if you are genuinely interested in like an industry or kind of type of role, you can always just look and see who's in the role, how have they got there, what's their pathway. Because I don't think there's no clear-cut pathway to any role. I think it always takes a different route, but I think the end goal is obviously what everyone wants to focus on, where I think you should focus on how you get there. That's the only problem.
LinkedIn, and to look at roles that you might be the ultimate role that you would want to look at, and then find somebody on LinkedIn in that role, and then you could almost track back how they did that. And I think that's really fascinating. And if you did that from other people, you can see all the multitude of different ways that people got in there. And I think people on LinkedIn still are quite open to be talked to if you message them or something. It's a really good way, and everybody who's listening should make sure that they have a LinkedIn profile and make the most of it. Olivia, do you have any advice for people, or can add to anything that we've already spoken about?
Yeah, I think just touching on what you were just talking about around reaching out to people on LinkedIn, get a mentor. I would hugely recommend a mentor. Somebody who has been and done what you'd like to do, because they can offer a wealth of experience, knowledge, little insights. They can help prep you for interviews, they can help review your CV. There's so many benefits to getting a mentor. And then I guess just as well, if you do want to go into accountancy, the exams are pretty tough. So don't be disheartened by that. Like, accept that they are tough, accept the challenge, and just know that the reward is so worth it when you're done, and that you'll have a career that's really, really rewarding out of it.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And lastly, AJ, what are your thoughts?
Bits of advice would be: one, be curious and ask questions, and that's not just of people in the sector when you meet them, but just more broadly showing an interest in people, and that's a great way to build rapport. And I think from most conversations you will learn something, and you'll certainly learn something about that person that will benefit you. And then the other thing is, you know, as you kind of go through your early career, you'll realize there's bits of jobs that you're better at. And I think my advice would be try and play to your strengths. That's not to say, you know, don't try and work on the areas that you're not as good at and try and develop them. But I think playing to your strengths and kind of finding that niche where you think, actually, this is what I enjoy. Because I think Louise's advice was spot on, which is if you do something you love, you'll be good at it, because it's hard not to be.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you everybody for taking part in today's webinar. It's been really insightful. Have a good rest of evening. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.